Hi.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jonathan Landreth. I'm a freelance journalist who's covered China for the last 25 years, formerly managing editor of China File at the Asia Society. It's really great to be back here for the China Careers Summit Day. Lauren, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. Our audience, Lauren Hallinan is the senior manager for strategic partnerships at Salesforce, one of the world's leading customer relationship management softwares. And bear with me a second. I just got a phone call and I've got to get through that glitch. There we go. All right. Can you hear me and see me all right, everyone? All right. Lauren, thanks so much. You and I spoke for the first time the other day in preparation for this conversation, and we talked about your remarkable journey in China. And you talked a lot about the word pivoting and how you pivoted from one career path to another. You're still quite young and already have amassed an amount of experience that's unexpected. Can you describe your starting point to our audience when you were studying international studies, leading up to what you consider your first big career pivot?
Yeah, definitely. I think the beginning of my career journey was an era of kind of cluelessness and just kind of figuring things out as I was going along, and kind of trusting that eventually I would figure things out. I was an international relations student at Bucknell University, and I did not know that I would end up having a career in China. I did not have this, passion as a high school student or, going into university, but I was just always very interested in other cultures and developing a job, related to something to do with international business, ideally. As I was going through my studies, China kept coming up all the time, obviously. I mean, that was quite a while ago, but, even back then, there were so many predictions about China becoming one of the largest world powers. And I already knew how much, our two economies depended on each other. And so it was always really top of mind. And then, we had to choose a specific area of focus. And as I told you the other day, my way of figuring out that I was going to develop a career related to China was actually, I just listed all the different areas of focus down, and I just went through them and checked off all the areas that I didn't think would be a smart choice for my career. And I ended up on China as the last one. And I said, you know what? China's going to be super important. This is going to be a good career choice. I didn't know anything about, I had never been to China. I hadn't started studying Chinese yet. I didn't even know if I would like it. Turned out I did. I studied abroad in Beijing. Absolutely loved it. Really started, my language skills started taking off while I was there. I ended up studying abroad for an entire year, stayed over the summer for an internship and then studied for an additional semester. I went back for my last semester of school, and immediately, I knew, I was like, if I don't get back to China right away, my language skills are going to go out the door. I'll find some job in the US, and I probably won't end up really using, China as part of my career path. So I went straight back over to China after graduating. And I really wasn't thinking too much about my career at that point. I was thinking, how can I get back over to China, immerse myself in the language, and be making some money? Because actually what I wanted to do right out of graduation was go and participate in an intensive language course and really, really get my language skills up to the level that they needed to be in order to be working in China and really feel like I could communicate well with my colleagues. Because I did an internship during college, and I felt like that my language skills was what was really holding me back. So I had actually got admitted to the IUP program at Tsinghua, but I didn't have money for it because I was a poor college graduate. So I deferred that, and I went and taught English for a year and a half straight out of college up in the Northeast in Changchun in China. It was extremely cold, but it was an amazing experience because, while a lot of my friends from study abroad were back in Beijing, going to clubs and eating at Western restaurants, I was living in a third tier city where a lot of people could not speak English. There was only one subway line. I mostly had to get around. I didn't have an iPhone back then. So it was a lot of like just reading street signs and getting lost all the time. And I learned so much from the experience. And I saved up a whole bunch of money, went back to Tsinghua and improved my Chinese skills from there. And, through the network of people that I met at that program, I was able to land my first job. And again, my first job right out of that program, I wasn't thinking as much about my career path as much as, again, how could I stay in China and start working in something besides English teaching, because I knew that.
Pause you there and ask a follow-on question to something you touched on here, but told me more about the other day. Mm-hmm. When you were in Changchun, you mentioned that there were not many people with smartphones. Could you ever have imagined that the world you occupy now, where you're constantly looking at Chinese social media and living with your phone in your hand, was possible when you were back in Changchun? And could the people around you in Changchun have imagined how far they've come? And tell us what year that was.
Yeah, that was back in 2010. And my smartphone was essentially just meant that, there was kind of like a screen on the phone where I think I maybe could connect to the internet, but it was super basic. No maps, map functions. I think, I could kind of like read messages from people on the screen. It was like, and I only got that like halfway into my time there. So I was probably with like a Nokia brick phone for most of the time there. Using email is the only way I could really connect with my family back home for most of my time there. It was a pretty lonely experience at times, but I think that's actually one of the reasons why I think, the start of my career, I didn't, the job that I have now and the job that I actually had for much of my time in China didn't exist at that time. And I kept saying to my teachers, I'm really looking for something where I can leverage my interest in Chinese pop culture, in youth culture, in what people are, buying, seeing, doing. I was very interested in the present, which I know that, you really do need to learn about, China's history and its past in order to understand its present. But I was always much of, the attitude of like, okay, I'll learn the stuff about the past, but what I'm really interested is in now, in the change, in like the culture. And I wanted a job that would reflect that. And I think back then that job didn't really exist. Now we have, social media marketing, e-commerce, all these things that really actually pull all of those elements in. And back then that literally that job, like it was in its very, very early stages. So I think that is one of the reasons why I didn't exactly know what to do with my career, because what I wanted to do didn't really quite exist back then.
I can relate to that. I remember being a college student in Los Angeles a whole era ago, and falling in love with Hong Kong gangster movies. And that's what led me to understand that I wanted to study more about Chinese culture. What was the pop culture product that hooked you initially? I'm curious.
I don't know if it was one thing initially. I think back, I when I was in Changchun, like I said, I was lonely at times. I was at a school where there was really no other foreigners, my age necessarily. And I actually, I would spend a lot of my nights or weekends watching just plain old Chinese TV, like the Happy Camp, the Kuala Dabaying, show, where they would bring a lot of celebrities on and jokes and then I can get into it now because it's actually my career pivot. But a show that I watched a lot back then was Fei Cheng Wu Rao, which was a very, very popular dating show back at that time. And that was one of my favorite things to watch as well, because I was really looking for conversational programs where it wasn't as much of the TV programs with the set lines or a lot of, the historical dramas. I was really looking for just ways to listen to people talking to each other in real life and seeing that. So I think maybe some of my interest in that, developed from then. I think some of it also developed from, living in a third tier city in China really opened up my eyes to how different people's lives are between first tier cities like Beijing and Shanghai, and then third tier cities. The type of students that I taught, I was at a vocational university. So these were not the good students that you typically meet when you're in Beijing, or even when you're studying at a US university and you have Chinese classmates. Like, my students back then were the students that failed out of their classes and could not get into any other type of college. So they went to this vocational school. And I was dealing with a whole nother side of Chinese society and youth culture. And I think that's part of it as well, is just realizing like the things that these people are interested in and that they deal with on their daily lives are completely different than the people that I meet in Beijing. And I just thought that was extremely interesting.
Can you give us an example of something that the students you taught in Changchun were interested in that had no play in big cities like Beijing and Shanghai?
I think they were just, where, a lot of students in the big cities, their parents, really keep them from kind of engaging with life, I feel like a lot of the students that I had met, they really weren't dedicated to their studies. So a lot of them, they had much richer, I think, life experiences. They would often go out partying. I had a student with a gambling addiction. They were just, I think, they themselves were more interested in celebrities and pop culture and things like that. Like, I think they just generally spent a lot less time heads down studying and more time having fun. So it was just a different type of student than I think, that you're used to when it comes to Chinese students. And then a lot of them were from the countryside as well. So just dealing with, having to help out their families with, things on the farm and things like that. So.
You mentioned Fei Chang Wu Rao. For those who don't know, it's a dating show that translates loosely into If You Are the One. It was very popular in China, many seasons. Tell us, if you would, about your journey through that world.
Yeah, so when I like I said, I was at the Tsinghua IUP program, and I finished there, and I started working for a couple of years. And while I was working, I went with a friend on the weekend to go to apply to be on the show as a contestant. We did it just as like something to do on a Saturday afternoon. I never had any expectations of actually getting on the show. It was like, hey, we're fans of the show. Let's go see what the application process is like. And, we just thought it would be fun. Never done something like that before. So little did I know that the other blonde hair, blue-eyed foreigner girl that was on the show at the time actually needed to return to her home country in a couple weeks for a family issue. And they were looking for a replacement. So essentially, I went and did the interview, and I got called back like the next day, saying, hey, you're going to be on the show in a couple of weeks. So I started spending nearly every other weekend going down to Nanjing for, usually a 3-day weekend where we were nonstop filming shows. And that experience actually really led me down the career path that I'm on now, because like I said before that, I really didn't know much about Chinese social media channels, the entertainment industry, things like that. I really wasn't clued into it. And when I got on the show, that was, again, I think that was 2011, 2012. So still pretty early stages of platforms like Weibo. And WeChat wasn't even, WeChat I think WeChat was around. Anyway, I think WeChat was around, but again, it was early stages for a lot of these platforms. But, I got on the show, and the other contestants on the show were like, hey, do you have a Weibo account? I was like, what is Weibo? I have no idea what Weibo is. And they're like, and for anybody who doesn't know, but you probably have heard of it, but Weibo is kind of like a mix of, Twitter, Facebook, in China. I would be shocked if you're studying Chinese and you haven't heard of Weibo by now. But so I opened up a Weibo account because they're like, if you're going to have this public presence and be on a national TV show, you really need to have your own Weibo account and be publishing content there, because if you don't, somebody else is going to open one and pretend to be you, and you need to really control you need to be able to control that and get that verified and claim that you're the real you. Otherwise, people will start like, anyway, just impersonating you, which that did actually happen. I had to get a couple of fake accounts shut down, even though I had my own account. But that kind of opened up my whole eyes to social media in China, especially because, not like I had a lot of followers, but I pretty much got like 10,000 followers overnight, which for me at the time, literally never having used social media really much at all in my life, it was like, oh my God, 10,000 followers. I have all these messages, like, what is this? Which like 10,000 is tiny in Weibo standards, but to me it was like a lot, and it just got me super interested. So, once I kind of decided I had had enough of the show and got off the show, I kind of realized I'm not interested in my current job anymore. And I really wanted to figure out how I could get myself into marketing, PR, just, into an entirely different industry, even though I really didn't have any background in it. So through a lot of networking and kind of, persuading people that I knew what I was talking about, I was actually able to pivot and get into an agency and kind of start the trajectory that I'm on now.
Tell me, much about being on a dating show, I imagine, is sort of projecting a brand, in terms of the industry. If you're doing it in another language, what's the challenge of like, are you playing the innocent foreigner who's coming in who doesn't speak good Chinese, or was your Chinese at that point so good that nobody batted an eyelash and was kind of amazed at what was happening? What was your personality on that show?
Yeah, so I think I was somewhere in between. So I was my Chinese level was definitely better than some of the contestants that they had, because they often invite not only, I guess Western, but there's also obviously a lot of Eastern European, Russian contestants. There's been a lot of like Korean, Japanese, Southeast Asian, African, they've had people from all over the world as contestants on the show. At that time there hadn't been too many, but I'd say my language skills fell somewhere in the middle. Like they had some people on where they definitely had no idea what was happening on the show, and it was just like deer in the headlights. Whereas I could pick up on a lot what was going on, and I was fluent enough at that point that I didn't find too much difficulty. I think for me it was actually more of the, you have a live audience of several hundred people, which can be really intimidating. There's a lot of lights in your face. There's a lot of things going on. Doing something like that in English is extremely intimidating, let alone doing it in Chinese. So I think that more of the, and also, if anybody's ever watched the show, they typically, for the male contestants, they'll play these videos that kind of give a background to the male contestants. And the videos are being played behind us. So you kind of have to like turn around and look at it sideways, and they don't have subtitles, and the sound is coming from somewhere else and it's a little bit delayed. So a lot of the time I actually didn't quite catch on everything. So, I didn't quite get the background of a lot of the contestants, which, and another aspect of the show that's, I think, a little bit difficult is that they don't automatically give everyone a chance to talk. You actually have to be really proactive with like raising your hand, blurting things out, like trying to get screen time. And if you're not trying to get screen time, they'll actually phase you off of the show. Because the only way that, that they know what your ratings are, for you as a contestant is the more screen time you get, right? And then the audience gets a chance to like you. So not only did I really not know what was going on half the time, but I was having to raise my hand and try and like participate at the same time. So I think it was definitely a challenge, but I think I was pretty proud of myself. Like looking back now, I think my language skills weren't that great because I'd only been in China for a couple of years at that point, but passable. Yeah.
It sounds to me like trial by fire in a course in self-marketing. And what did you learn then from the comments and the interaction you got from those 10,000 followers who were watching you? Were they telling you what they liked and didn't like, and what trends they were interested in as soon as you engaged with them on Weibo?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people that engaged with me on Weibo were just, asking a lot about me, about the U.S., my life in China, generally more of like just trying to get to know me type questions, or, saying how they, enjoyed things that I was saying on the show. I definitely tried to avoid going on any of the channels like the public threads. There was definitely a lot of negative comments as well, but I tried to avoid those because it's not too great for your self-esteem. But I think, the show was huge. I think a huge confidence booster for me back at that time. It was extremely outside my comfort zone. And I think, once you have been a contestant on what was then one of the top rated shows in China at that time, literally I was having multiple people stop me on the street every day and knew who I was for a good year or two. I think it's a huge confidence booster. And I think that that's actually what kind of gave me the bravery to then pivot into a career that I really had no background or experience in, but I was able to, kind of push my way in because I felt like I had done this. I think I gave me confidence to kind of do anything.
Do you want to share with the audience the interesting ending to that story?
Yeah, so actually, it's kind of a matching. It's a game show kind of where there'll be 24 girls and one male contestant will come out and you'll learn about them, and then kind of through a series of events, there's a chance that you and one of the male and the male contestant will walk off the stage together and kind of be paired together, right? So that's kind of the whole point of the show, is to match people up. And the person that I left the show with, we did not stay in touch. There was nothing there. It was more for the show purposes. But actually, about a year later, I ended up meeting another one of the more recent male contestants on the show. And he's now my husband. We've been married for 5 years. He's Chinese from Beijing. So the show not only started off a whole new career path for me, but I ended up, meeting my husband through the show as well, which is, it's definitely a fun story when people ask, how did you guys meet?
The power of media in China.
Yeah.
You started to hint at the next pivot into a career about which you knew very little. You've just described an amazing sort of trial by fire in getting to raise your hand and try to make yourself clear and understood in another language. You talked about a time when nobody was really using these platforms. Now these platforms are ubiquitous at a scale that most of the rest of the world just doesn't understand. And you're at a company that is trying to really tap into that power. Tell us what it is that you do for Salesforce and how you go about bringing that experience you've just described to your job.
Yeah, so between 非诚勿扰 and now has been many years and lots of different roles. I've amassed a lot of experience across PR, digital marketing, social media marketing, the entertainment industry, live streaming, e-commerce, lots of different job experiences since then. But my most recent role, I'm currently at Salesforce, and I lead marketing for our strategic partnership with Alibaba and the products that we are building / bringing to the China market. And I've been there for about a year now, and it's super exciting because only a couple weeks ago, we announced a new commerce product that we have created specifically for the China market that'll be going live a couple months from now. So it's really exciting to be working for such a large US technology company and work together on their partnership with Alibaba, which obviously is a company that I extremely respect and admire, and getting to kind of be at the intersection of these two technology giants, and get to, while I'm at Salesforce, I also get to interact with people from Alibaba on a daily basis, and use all of my China skills and experience on a daily basis. So I think it's a pretty exciting role to be in.
For the audience members who might not know what each of these two companies do, can you just describe in very fundamental terms what Salesforce does and which part of Alibaba you've partnered with to do what?
Yeah, so I am, I'm not a super tech savvy person. Salesforce is a CRM, or a customer relationship management platform. And we have a whole massive suite of products that essentially help companies, better connect with their customers, whether it's e-commerce, sales, service, marketing, and all of these products connect with each other, allowing you to get a 360 view of your customers, and, whether it's providing better customer service, e-commerce experiences, et cetera. And then Alibaba is a huge tech giant in China. They do so many different things, but they're probably most well known for their e-commerce platforms, Tmall and Taobao. They also have, their hands in a lot of other things, whether that's mobile payments, enterprise chat apps. We specifically work on a daily basis with Alibaba Cloud, which is their public cloud provider arm. So our products are hosted on Alibaba Cloud in China. So that's the main component of our partnership at the moment, is having our products hosted on Alibaba Cloud and working with the development teams over there.
And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, working with Alibaba Cloud is a requirement by law for Salesforce. You have to actually host customer data in China. Is that correct?
It's a fast changing area right now. So I think this could be a whole nother session. I think there's a lot of details, a lot of details and like nuances. There was a recent data privacy regulations that came out. I think it was back in late August. That's kind of changing the landscape right now, and it's definitely requiring a lot more companies to keep specific types of customer data within mainland China. So that's definitely, this has been developing for several years now, and so that was definitely top of mind for Salesforce when they went into the partnership with Alibaba, was that this is happening in countries all over the world, right? There's GDPR in Europe. So there's, we knew that in China there would be an increasing data regulations, and having data hosted in mainland China and working with a local provider would help our customers navigate a lot of that. There's a lot of other reasons for the partnership as well. I think it's a very generally, when you're doing things in China, it's really smart to have a partner that understands the local ecosystem. As much as we have a lot of people at Salesforce that understand the local ecosystem as well, I think it's always smart to be partnering with a local company that can really help you out with all of that as well.
Backtracking for just a moment, you sort of threw away one of your other experiences, which is as a live streamer before you got to Salesforce. And live streaming in China, talking about what it's like to be an American there, must again have connected you with lots of people, individual Chinese. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned from that experience and on which platforms you were live streaming?
Yeah, so I had been working for a PR firm for several years, and I just really wanted to kind of take a break from that and get out of the corporate environment and kind of figure out next steps. And that was when mobile live streaming was really starting to take off in China. This was back in late 2015. So we're not talking about e-commerce live streaming, which is extremely popular now. but more of entertainment live streaming. So a lot of people were, singing, dancing, I don't know, all sorts of entertainment. I was just chatting with people, but usually there was like themes and things like that. But anyway, you can earn money from live streaming through virtual gifts that your audience sent you. And it was something that, being in the digital marketing, social media industry, I had kind of seen that this was an emerging trend. And I was like, hey, while I'm figuring things out, why don't I start, live streaming, maybe, make a little bit of money on the side, have the experience. I've always been very much like, ever since the Feichang Wurao days, anytime I heard about a new platform coming out, I would always really get on it right away and start experimenting with the platform myself, because I think you can learn a lot that way, even more than just reading what other people are saying about the platform. So I immediately got on a variety of different platforms, including Momo, Huajiao, Yizhibo. There are several different platforms. Some of them are kind of gone now or have been rolled into others. But I actually, things started to take off with that, and I was actually live streaming, making pretty decent income. I ended up having across all the platforms around 400,000 followers, and was live streaming kind of, I wouldn't say full time, but very, very regularly for a little over a year, about a year and a half. But I think that was really important, number one, because when e-commerce live streaming started happening, I had kind of a really strong insight into the live streaming space, and I've been able to leverage my knowledge of my live streaming experience to understand e-commerce live streaming, which is a very big trend now, and that's something that I've really been able to leverage over the past few years of my work. But actually, what I really got out of that experience was that I started to document the experience from very early on. I opened a website that I had as a blog, and I was very open and honestly documenting the experience, from trends that I was noticing as far as how people were interacting with me, the weird ways that these platforms worked, or, new features, or, you kind of have to work with these MNCs. They're like middlemen on these platforms, and or I was honestly sharing, documenting how much money I was making each month from live streaming, things like that. And little did I know that would actually catch the attention of a lot of people. So I started to get interviewed for, I think I was on BBC Radio. I got interviewed for, various websites and things like that.
You're describing getting to know consumers at the very base. You're describing getting to know individuals.
I think more so though. I caught a lot of the attention of investors and tech companies who wanted to either invest in a lot of these platforms, which were publicly listed, and I was giving them a view that they were not getting anywhere else in the English language at that time. And then another thing was the tech companies here in the US who, live streaming really took off in much more quickly in China than in the US. And there was a lot of features and technologies and things. And a lot of the tech companies in the US were reaching out to me to learn about all of these features and technologies. So I think even more so than the consumer insights, which has been valuable to me, as those consumer insights. And it gave me a lot of insight into into Chinese society. But I think how it affected my career the most was the, starting to work with investors and tech companies who were interested in the knowledge that I had. And that was something that I had never thought would come out of my blog and that experience.
Well, having amassed all of that experience and information, you're now dealing with a company that deals not necessarily with individuals, but with giant corporations trying to reach those individuals. So you're sort of reverse engineering the experience for them. That said, there's a lot of news in the headlines about trade war and strategic competition. Is it ever hard to work as a joint venture these days with a company like Alibaba? Does the U.S.-China tension impact your partnership day to day?
I mean, I can't really touch on that too much. I'm just not able to. But I will say that it's obviously a concern for parties on all sides, and we do have to take a lot into consideration as we're building out these products, whether it's the geopolitical atmosphere, whether it's regulations that are coming out. There's a lot of things that, like you said, we're working with some of our customers are some of the largest, retail companies in the world. And they've got a lot of concerns about how to navigate the environment over there. So whether it's us and the concerns that we're facing building out our products in the region, or whether it's working with our customers who are facing a lot of challenges in the region, it's constant battles and challenges, and you constantly have to stay. Things change so quickly as far as what's allowed, what's not allowed, what platforms you can use, what platforms are being banned. There's so much going on in China that it's really sometimes difficult to stay on top of, and you have to be really ready to answer a really wide variety of questions that are coming from customers about everything that's going on and the current circumstances. So yes, I will say it does. It's something that we think about every day. I can't comment too much on it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. As we approach the sort of 10-minute mark for our audience, I want to encourage anybody who's watching, please, to put your questions for Lauren into the comments and the chat. We'd be happy to field them and pass them on to her. Meanwhile, Lauren, tell me, can you describe for us, one of the challenges, whether you name the client or not, is up to you, that might never have arisen in a market like the US that arises in China for a Salesforce client?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing that we work with a lot of the clients. Obviously there's a lot of regulations that are different, but I think the biggest thing that we have to work on is that Salesforce products, many Salesforce products are, incredible products that have, that are being used all throughout the world. But when you go to the China market, if you start to get into e-commerce and marketing, it's a completely different environment. The platforms that the typical marketer in the US is used to using, aren't available in China. It's an entirely local ecosystem. Again, with e-commerce, e-commerce is completely different in the China market, entirely different platforms, entirely different consumer behaviors. Consumers aren't, shopping on websites nearly as much, right? They're using, the e-commerce marketplaces, or they're buying things through social platforms like WeChat, or Douyin, which is the Chinese TikTok. So I think the biggest challenge both for us and for our customers is navigating all of the local channels and the pace at which these local channels are changing, just because, platforms that didn't exist a year ago might be now, need to be a prominent part of your commerce or marketing strategy. And I think it's also interesting for us because we're oftentimes dealing with both the global offices for these multinationals as well as their local China offices, which oftentimes have different viewpoints and different opinions on how things should be handled and how they want to work with our company. So I think that there's a lot of challenges, but I think that the entirely different platform ecosystem is definitely a huge challenge as we're creating new products or adapting our products to the China market to help better serve our customers there.
Thank you, Lauren. Again, I want to encourage the audience to put questions in the chat if you've got any. You just described a potential disconnect between headquarters and the in China offices of any given corporation. Around what does that revolve? Is it a function of who's hired within each of those offices and their cultural understanding, language ability? Where is the disconnect between, New York and Shenzhen, for instance?
Yeah, I think unfortunately a lot of the challenges have been exacerbated because of COVID, right, and not being able to travel. I think that it's difficult because the local teams, obviously, like I said, the platforms, the strategies that they're using in the local market are often entirely different than what the global team is putting into place in the rest of the world. And I think that, like you just touched on several things. It's oftentimes, language barriers. It's oftentimes a lack of understanding of the China market from the global team, and that'll really vary from company to company, but it's understandable a lot of times, right? The global offices are dealing with, they're generally dealing with multiple regions at once, and trying to stay on top of everything that's going on in China can be a huge challenge for them. And I think, for them, it's like learning an entirely new environment. So yeah, a lot of it just comes from the fact that China is just so incredibly different. It's really tough for global teams to keep on top of, unless they really have some dedicated people in the global office that are constantly communicating with the China team and really trying to keep the global team educated on what the China team is doing. Otherwise, there can often be a disconnect, especially because right now, people from the global team aren't able to travel to China. I think before COVID, a lot of times the global team would regularly go to the China region and really get to, have boots on the ground and understand and see what was going on. And that's not possible right now. So I think that's where a lot of it comes from.
Thank you. We've got a question from the audience from Zhang Jianqing. What advice would you give to young people who are currently preparing their career in a China-related job? Bearing in mind, I might add that not everybody is as gregarious as you and willing to go on a dating show and raise their hand for screen time. So what's some fundamental advice for someone who's preparing their career in a China-related job?
Yeah, I think biggest one is, for me at least, I think language skills, like definitely work as hard as you can on the language skills. Not to say that you can't. I know plenty of people who have successful careers in China that don't have the language skills, but for me, I think the language skills have been extremely important, especially for my role. My role would not be possible, or it would be much more difficult without the language skills. And it makes you much more valuable. I'd say once COVID things get better, I think getting there and spending as much time in the region as possible is definitely extremely important. Just because I think that it's truly a different environment, and there's only so much that you can learn about it from the internet. I think there's only so far that your career can go without at least spending a couple of years over there, immersed in the environment. And I think also just trying to develop a network of not only, like, for example, if you are able to go over there, or if you're based over there right now, while you're there, not only developing a network of other expats, but also developing as much as you can a network of local Chinese people, not necessarily even for job purposes, but just again to, better understand Chinese people, what their lives are like. I think there's so many foreigners that go to China and try and develop careers there. And they don't spend a lot of time actually with the local Chinese community, which I think is not beneficial to a career there. The last thing I would say is just to, like you mentioned, I kind of kickstarted things by being on a TV show. I think what the core thing is that I was never afraid to go out of my comfort zone and attempt to do jobs that I really had no background in. I just maintained the confidence that I would figure it out as I was doing it. And that has served me well throughout my career so far. Just being not afraid to pivot into something entirely new, and just give it a go.
Lauren, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Lauren Hallinan of Salesforce talking about independence, pivoting, and good Chinese language. Thanks to the Asia Society for another session of the China Careers Summit. My name is Jonathan Landreth. Lauren, I encourage you to put your contacts in the comments if you wish to get further feedback from any of the audience. Anybody can reach me for further questions at jslandreth@mac.com. Asia Society, thanks you all for joining. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.